Israel and Iran are at war. At the time of writing, it hasn't been formalized, but after what happened in the pre-dawn hours of June the 13th, it's as good as done. Israel has launched a massive sequence of airstrikes, sabotage, and targeted assassination across Iran, targeting the country's nuclear facilities, its military leadership, and its ballistic missiles. Iran has made clear its intent to retaliate in kind. The United States stands ready to respond with overwhelming force, and the time for negotiation has conclusively passed. It's the showdown that the Middle East has been building toward for decades, and it's finally here. Israel and Iran, 0 seconds to midnight. Here's what you need to know in advance of what comes next. Now, before we begin, we've got to issue a very important caveat here. Everything that we discussed today is accurate to the best of our ability as of 9 o'clock in the morning, local time in Tehran on Friday, June the 13th. We have worked to produce and publish this episode as quickly as possible. Indeed, I'm heading off on holiday this afternoon. I wasn't even supposed to be in the office this morning, but they're at war. But we can practically guarantee that the situation will have evolved further by the time that you see this episode. Rest assured that we will be back to cover major developments in due time. Indeed, I'm back from holiday next week. Oh, with that out of the way, let's begin. The explosions began at about 3 o'clock in the morning, again, local time in Tehran. In Jerusalem, the attack was dubbed Operation Rising Lion. Among the most important targets for Israel was a key uranium enrichment facility called Natanz, where Iran has worked to prepare enough uranium at the proper enrichment levels that it could create weapons-grade material on short notice. Images circulating on social media in the immediate aftermath of Israel's first wave of strikes showed Natanz in flames, with smoke billowing high into the sky. According to the chief of Iran's Atomic Energy Agency, Natanz is now severely damaged. But Natanz was far from Israel's only target. According to sources from within Israel's defense apparatus, the Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, hit a number of sites relating to Iran's nuclear program, as well as its missile launch capabilities and its command and control infrastructure. A number of hits were reported across the capital city of Tehran, including at 6 separate military bases, 2 secure command posts, and residential units where important Iranian figures lived. The headquarters of the Revolutionary Guard Corps was reported to be in flames by the time the first strike ended, with some accounts indicating that a crisis meeting between senior leaders was underway when the facility was hit. Iran declared a nationwide state of emergency in response, although by the time it went into effect, a second wave of strikes was already on its way. After a few hours, Israeli sources reported that the IDF had logged around 300 successful hits, with that number only expected to rise as the situation evolves. According to a wide range of sources speaking anonymously to the global press, Israel's first wave of attacks went far beyond just airstrikes. Israeli intelligence elements linked to the Mossad organization moved into action all across the country, especially in urban areas, carrying out a range of acts of sabotage and targeted assassination. Now, the specifics of those operations not yet known as of the time of writing, but already it is clear that the cultivation of assets and the preparation on the ground for an attack of this scale must have taken years. In addition to high-level officials, Mossad targeted Iran's air defense systems as well as its ballistic missiles and launch equipment. Israeli intelligence sources have indicated that the nation also worked to create a false sense of security for Iran immediately prior to the attack, including a vacation for Benjamin Netanyahu and an upcoming wedding for his son. Just as important as the locations that Israel hit are the individuals that Israel has eliminated. Among those who have been confirmed dead are Hossein Salami, the leader of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and Mohammad Bagheri, chief of staff of the entire Iranian military. Also among the dead, the Gholam Ali Rashid, commander of the central headquarters of the Iranian General Staff, and Ali Shamkhani, the senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader, who was entrusted to be Iran's chief negotiator in working toward a new nuclear deal with the United States. In totality, Israel is believed to have eliminated a large portion of Iran's top military leadership, if not most or even all of the nation's most important military decision-makers. Just as important is the list of people who've survived thus far. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, President Masoud Pezeshkian, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, and Minister of Defense Aziz Nasirzadeh. None of them are believed to have been targeted by this wave of Israeli strikes, but that could change in the future. As of the time of writing, Iran is only engaged in a limited retaliation, with the IDF reporting that Iran has launched a number of kamikaze drones toward Israel. While the reason for the lack of larger immediate response hasn't been confirmed outright, is hardly a secret. Israel's attack appears to have been quite clearly intended to destroy Iran's command and control infrastructure, and Israel now appears to have succeeded. Iran's supreme leader has already appointed a few replacement figures, including a new chief of staff of the armed forces, but that's only one small part of what Iran will need to do in the coming days. With the magnitude and scope of what Israel has achieved, it's likely that Iran's surviving military leaders will need time before they can even figure out who's supposed to be in charge now. Iranian MiG-29 fighter jets did scramble to respond, but it's unclear whether or not any air-to-air engagements actually took place. If they did, then this may well be the day that the American-made F-35 fighter, specifically the customized version that Israel flies, gets its first test in head-to-head aerial combat. Reports to that effect have not yet emerged as of yet. With the Middle East on a knife's edge, we'll wait for another day to explain the ins and outs of how we got here. The most important context, however, is to do with the ongoing nuclear negotiations between Iran and the United States. Over the last few months, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has come out as a staunch opponent of the talks, arguing that Iran cannot be trusted to engage in a nuclear deal of any sort, and it's a foolhardy endeavor to even try and come to terms. Those concerns have been validated by recent reports that found that Iran is rapidly increasing its stockpiles of low-enriched uranium. That affords Iran a dangerous breakout capability, and experts now estimate that within a span of weeks, Iran could enrich enough of its existing stocks to weapons grade, which it could use to build 10 nuclear warheads. It would take longer for Iran to build and assemble a delivery mechanism for them, but that would likely be a matter of just months. According to Israel, however, even that is an undercount. Speaking to the global press as strikes were already underway, Israeli officials alleged that Iran had enough uranium to produce 15 nuclear bombs. Not only that, but they alleged the bombs were already being assembled and that Iran was just days away from final nuclear breakthrough. Now, we do have to emphasize here that those claims have not been validated independently, but as of now, they're the explanation that Israeli sources have provided for the strike. Since the start of the nuclear negotiations, the United States under Donald Trump has worked to hold Israel in check, making sure that Israel didn't carry out a strike several months ago and demanding a chance to establish a diplomatic settlement. As recently as 2 weeks ago, Washington was urging Jerusalem to be patient and avoid launching strikes, citing the fact that Iran was at that time still participating actively in the negotiating process. But now, with Trump seeming to grow more skeptical about Iran's willingness to work with the US, it's unclear that he tried to prevent Netanyahu from taking action. Trump and Netanyahu spoke by phone as recently as Monday, but few details about the content of that call have been disclosed to the public. Iran has insisted that it retain the ability to enrich uranium on its own territory, a clear non-starter for Israel, and efforts to work out a compromise don't appear to have had any success. Prior to Israel's wave of attacks, the US and Iran were scheduled to meet in the nation of Oman this Sunday in a sixth-round, last-ditch attempt to establish a nuclear settlement. According to US officials, America still intends to be present for those talks as scheduled, although it's not clear that Iran will have any desire to come to the table. Not only has the nation's lead negotiator been killed, but it's not even clear that Iran has a nuclear program to negotiate over anymore. Nor is it clear that Iran has any interest in pursuing an off-ramp after what's just happened all across the country. Right now, it's impossible to say for sure how this conflict will end. But we can say with some confidence that it will not be ending quickly. According to Benjamin Netanyahu himself, Operation Rising Lion is expected to persist for several days at least. Other Israeli sources suggest that Jerusalem is ready to keep things going for weeks or even longer if need be. Israel's leadership was shifted to secure locations within hours of the start of the strikes, and the nation has closed its airspace and placed all of its hospitals on notice for a large-scale emergency. Israeli news channels are reporting that the nation's leaders expect Iran to unleash a massive, coordinated drone and missile assault, possibly lasting for days or even weeks. Iran is believed to possess around 2,000 heavy-yield ballistic missiles, as well as many tens of thousands of unmanned kamikaze drones and at least a few thousand long-range cruise missiles. It is critically important to understand here that just hitting Iran really hard doesn't necessarily interrupt Iran's ability to launch a massive counterattack, and Iran has spent years planning and distributing its aerial projectiles and launch systems to ensure that it could retaliate even if its command and control infrastructure was decapitated. And it's equally vital to understand that although Israeli air defenses are robust, no air defense system is infallible anywhere in the world. Air defenses can only shoot down as many incoming projectiles as they have interceptors, and with the sheer volume that Iran could launch its weapons, it's a distinct possibility that Israeli or even American air defenses could be overwhelmed, leading to mass casualties on the ground. But for Israel's part, the Netanyahu government appears entirely committed to the cause. This was not a mere warning shot by Israel. Jerusalem did have the option to launch a more limited attack, maybe destroy some air defense systems or drop inert, non-exploding munitions at the locations of Iran's senior leadership in order to coerce Iran into accepting more favorable terms at the meeting in Amman this weekend. Instead, Israel went for the throat in a series of strikes that aren't even somewhat debatable in their intent, and Israel fully understands that this will demand retribution. As for the role of the United States, Israel's most important international backer, that remains to be seen. On the one hand, there's a decent argument to be made that Israel's actions may have been intended as a slap in the face to America's Trump administration, with whom Netanyahu is known to be on less than ideal terms for reasons that we won't be getting into today. For Israel to carry out such a devastating series of strikes, when by all accounts the US plan to meet with Iranian officials this weekend, could be read as an outright dismissal of America's priorities and strategic leadership. On the other hand, if Washington tacitly signed off on the attack or privately endorsed Israel's plans, then it's equally fair to say that the nation might benefit from looking as if it's been caught off guard. But the most troubling possibility is that Israel may intend to lure the United States into a larger conflict, even against its own will, by launching such a large assault that Iran is almost guaranteed to retaliate at large scale. Quoting National Security reporter John Hudson on X, a US official says this attack will provoke a significant Iranian response that the Israelis will then ask the United States to help counter, despite the fact that it just blew up the delicate US diplomatic talks. End quote. That request would be a hard one for Washington to refuse, and even more so if American assets are targeted by Iran alongside the nation of Israel. American military might would go a very long way in supporting Israel's objectives, although Israel might be most interested in one specific military asset. And that would be the GBU-57, better known as the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, a 5,000-pound bunker buster that's designed to burrow into the ground and destroy Iran's most hardened nuclear facilities, where Israel's best munitions still can't touch. American warplanes are stationed around the Middle East in such great numbers that they could lay waste to Tehran if they get the go-ahead. For now, we'll have to leave it at that. But as this crisis evolves, we are very confident that the trouble has only just begun. Be safe, be smart, watch closely for whatever comes next. Thank you for watching.